Chapter 735. Gui, are you kidding me? During the gathering, Jiang Hao listened to Xing attentively. He was indeed curious about the matter concerning Shang, and legendary figures like him remained legendary even in gatherings. Since his master's intrusion into the Clear Sky School, Shang had been on their radar. They thought he would remain quiet for a while and then make a startling breakthrough. But they never expected him to keep surprising them. This time, the opportunity had left them all stunned. "I'm curious about something," Gui said. "Did Shang's master ever visit the Bright Moon sect in the past?" Everyone turned to Xing. He was momentarily speechless. He genuinely didn't know about this. If it had happened, only the seniors guarding the gate would know. But since it didn't become a major issue, either nothing had happened, or it was hushed up. If it was the latter, they were in trouble. But who else would know? Even if someone did know, they wouldn't dare to speak of it. Jiang Hao kept a low profile and didn't pay too much attention. When the path opened, how many people obtained the opportunity? Liu asked Gui. 4. There was Baiji of the Heavenly Note sect, Zhuge Jin from the Mountain Seasword sect, Xie Dongnan from the Clear Sky School, and Heavenly King Mu Longyu. However, the Heavenly King failed, and I don't know why, Gui said. It seems to be related to the Heavenly King's fortune. It's indeed because of the Heavenly King's fortune, said Zhong. I remember it's mentioned in the books. Heavenly King's fortune helps one to become a king, but it also limits them. The more they use it, the more difficult it is to ascend. Even with the immortality road, it's still challenging to become an immortal. Jiang Hao thought that he could have continued in the explanation regarding the Heavenly King's fortune, but it seemed that others were roughly aware of it. Senior Dan Yuan would know the details. However, he was surprised that Zhuge Jin was one of the people who obtained the opportunity. The others nodded slightly but didn't delve into further discussion. Senior Dan Yuan looked at Gui and said, "This information can be exchanged for a small reward." "I'll save it and ask for a snow god pill later," Gui said. Senior Dan Yuan smiled and nodded. No one was surprised. Gui had a particular fondness for snow god pills. Jiang Hao couldn't help but envy her. How many of those had she consumed? No other major sects had as many as she did. Senior Dan Yuan didn't have any more tasks to assign, so it was time for the exchange. Zhong, who had been paying attention to Jing, was a bit surprised that he was negotiating directly with Senior Dan Yuan. In gatherings, people only considered trading with Senior Dan Yuan when no one else would take the task. It seemed that she had underestimated him. If he wasn't knowledgeable, he wouldn't be sitting here. "I want external and internal information," said Dan Yuan. "What about just general information?" Jiang Hao asked. "That's all right too, but I might also not provide direct answers to your questions," said Dan Yuan. Jiang Hao agreed. He quietly listened. The more he listened, the more he learned. For example, Zhong's location was in the west. That would give him a general idea of the situation in the west. If she was from the north, it would be even better. Zhong could understand that Jing had completed Senior Dan Yuan's task. She also roughly realized that Jing and Gui were probably somewhere in the south because everyone had looked at them when asked about the Immortal Road. As for the details, she needed to continue to gather more information. "I want to find someone," Zhong hesitated and said. "There was someone who left the Astronomical Academy with a certain book. I want to find this person. I don't know who this person is specifically, but they took a book left by a great senior. It's called the Ancient and Modern Book." "You were looking for someone?" Gui was taken aback. She instinctively looked at Jing. Xing and Liu also looked at him. "Why are you looking at Meg?" Jiang Hao right helpless. What did this have to do with him? Even Zhong was surprised. Why was everyone looking at Jing? Soon, everyone turned away from him, and they all agreed to inform each other if they had any information. Once they confirmed that there were no more trades to discuss, Gui said excitedly, "Recently, a lot has been happening in the southern region. The Grand Earth Emperor has been completely silent, with no news of him whatsoever. However, his aura is continuously rising. The Black Heavens sect is receiving the blessings of the earth. It is likely to become a major sect." Liu sighed. The Shenyuan sword and the Grand Earth Emperor have both fallen silent. This is actually a good thing for other sects. Otherwise, it would easily lead to conflicts. But even so, some people will still be dissatisfied, and the Black Heaven sect probably won't have it easy. Jiang Hao understood that some people would rather harm themselves than allow others to achieve merits. They would constantly challenge others. Besides the Grand Earth Emperor, there's something else you all need to be aware of, Gui said. The end of all things has been acting up. It seems they are about to find the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. They are getting close to the Heavenly Note sect. At her words, everyone became more serious. Senior Dan Yuan then turned to Jing. Friend Jing, have you been paying attention to this? The others also followed suit, and Zhong looked puzzled. From her observations, this individual seemed to have average knowledge, so why was he being asked about such an important matter? When did they start discussing such unlucky items in the gathering? Jiang Hao hesitated and thought about what Hong Yuye had told him. Finally, he said, the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl is about to appear. The entire group was stunned. It was too sudden. Why? Gui was the first to ask. Everyone was relieved that they had Gui in the gathering to ask the hard questions. Jiang Hao remained silent. Could he reveal that he was being targeted? Senior Dan Yuan asked, Friend Jing, do you have any plans? Jiang Hao replied respectfully, in a few days, I plan to go and check it out. Zhong was frozen in place. What did they mean? Everyone knew about the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl, and some even knew it might manifest. But this person was talking about checking it out personally. Did this mean he knew where it was, and he could observe it up close? What had happened in the past decade? Furthermore, Jing didn't seem as weak and insignificant as she had thought. He was somewhat formidable. So, when he had been quiet earlier, it wasn't because he had limited knowledge. It was only because he didn't care for simple matters. Zhong felt that she had misunderstood him entirely. Those who attended the gathering were not weak. They were powerful individuals. However, discussing such ill-fated items was a bit too much. At that point, Gui noticed that Zhong was perplexed. Zhong, I know you just arrived. There are some things we haven't been able to explain to you. I'll tell you everything later. Can you give me a brief overview? Zhong asked. Oh, an overview. Gui thought for a moment. Do you know about the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl and the 9 Nether? I've heard of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. I've never heard of the 9 Nether. The 9 Nether is a monstrous entity created by the fallen immortal clan. It was the reason for the war declared by the human emperor. These two terrifying items are both in his hands. Furthermore, I think the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl is within his sight right now. Zhong was speechless. Gui, are you kidding me? Chapter 736. This era has abandoned mither. Private conversation between Gui and Zhong did not take up much time at the gathering. Jiang Hao welcomed this development, as it would help improve his impression in the eyes of others. Otherwise, there would be many unfounded speculations and he might be exposed. However, with various events adding to his image, things would be much better. In the beginning, he had gone to great lengths to cultivate the image of a reclusive, powerful, and mysterious individual, which had made things easier for him today. Zhong had just come out of seclusion, and she didn't know anything about him. The others, especially Gui, had asked some probing questions in the beginning, but that was not the case now. Having someone explain his situation would improve his image in Zhong's eyes. But listening to it felt a bit embarrassing because he knew that he wasn't as remarkable as they made him out to be. Many times, he had only been fortunate to achieve certain things. In reality, he was much weaker than the others at the gathering. What do you plan to do if the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl can't be sealed? Xing asked. The only person at the gathering who had actually come into contact with the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was Jiang Hao. He was also the only one with any experience with these kinds of dangerous items. Since he had the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, it was possible that only he could handle the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. The others were curious, including Zhong, and wanted to know what his plans were. She knew too little and needed to listen attentively. Don't look at me. What can I even do? Jiang Hao felt helpless. Finally, he shook his head. This wasn't something he could control. The others understood his situation well. The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was not something ordinary. It was incredibly challenging to seal it, let alone possess it. The difficulty was beyond their imagination. We should try to hinder the end of all things. I heard that some members of the Saint Bandits have arrived overseas. We can provide them with information, and maybe they will take some action, said Liu. Gui and Xing also agreed to help pass on the information to hinder the end of all things. That was all they could do. As for the monstrous item itself, it would depend on Jing, as he had said he would go in to investigate. Zhong didn't say anything. She really didn't know what was going on. Once they had settled that matter, Xing mentioned that the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment had already set off. To the west? Liu suddenly asked. Xing nodded. Jiang Hao was curious about how Liu knew about the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment going to the west. He then realized it was likely related to Xing's mission. He also mentioned something about a moon wheel. Did Chu Jie go to the west for the moon wheel? Jiang Hao didn't know what the moon wheel was. Unfortunately, Gui didn't ask. Zhong felt like she was out of touch with the world of cultivation. She had never heard of the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment, the Grand Earth Emperor, the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl, the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, and the Nine Nether. These were not unfamiliar terms. They were legendary items. People rarely mentioned them during normal conversations, and even when they did, few knew much about them. But now, it seemed like the gathering treated these topics casually as if they were simple matters. What had happened in the world of cultivation to make her feel so out of place? The discussion continued with a focus on the end of all things, the Grand Earth Emperor, and the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment. It was said that the one with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment was entering the mortal world and would re-emerge. It would mark the day of their ascension to immortality. Reportedly, she had left alone. After some time, the gathering concluded with Senior Dan Yuan's reminder. When Jiang Hao woke up, he took out a notebook and started recording the key points of the gathering. Senior Dan Yuan mentioned the pages of an ancient book in the West. A new participant, Zhong, seems to have extensive knowledge of various documents and is considered a formidable individual from the West. Xing was searching for Zhong to find something related to the moon wheel, while Zhong was looking for someone in possession of an ancient and modern book. Requested information from Senior Dan Yuan about the corpse realm and told him that the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was about to manifest. On that note, I need to visit the blood pool. The rest of the topics about the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment and the end of all things were not explicitly recorded, as they didn't seem to be very important. After recording the information, Jiang Hao put the book away. I wonder if there are any other individuals besides Zhong. He could have asked, but he didn't want to ruin the image of a reclusive individual that he had built. He would have to address that later. For now, the new information had stumped Zhong, so she might not probe too much into his business. After that, Jiang Hao closed his eyes to rest and conserve his energy. In a few days, he would confirm the status of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl and continue with his days. The opening of the corpse realm didn't concern him. The next day, Jiang Hao went to the spirit herb garden with the spirit beast. During this period, the entire sect had been relatively quiet, likely because of the opportunities brought by Shong'an. Many had secluded themselves to cultivate. There wasn't much movement around. At noon, while Jiang Hao was tending to the spirit herbs, the spirit beast was engaged in an animated conversation with Xiao Li. Cheng Chou was busy with his tasks. Suddenly, a communication talisman flew in front of Jiang Hao. It was a message from the Lawless Tower. It's been a while since I last visited. I wonder what this is about. Jiang Hao was a bit surprised. He talked to Cheng Chou and then walked toward the Lawless Tower. Xiao Li asked if she should prepare his lunch, but Jiang Hao quickly declined. Xiao Li's lunches were something he could eat, but she had a habit of sometimes offering her own lunch to him. Fortunately, it wasn't usually poisoned and was quite close by, so there was no need to worry. A short while later, in front of the Lawless Tower, Jiang Hao saw two people at the gates, a man and a woman with formidable auras. Is that Mi Lingyu and Mu Longyu? When Jiang Hao saw them, he was surprised that they were planning to enter the lawless tower. He realized that they had detected his arrival. Jiang Hao was a bit concerned, but he didn't let it show. He walked over and greeted them with a polite bow. "Greetings, seniors. Friend Jiang, no need to be so formal," Mu Longyu said with a smile. At that moment, senior sister Yinshaw came out as well. Jiang Hao found this surprising because Mu Longyu was no ordinary person. Why hadn't the branch master personally welcomed them? No need for such formalities. "We're here to meet a friend. That isn't a bother, right?" Mu Longyu asked politely. After exchanging a few greetings, they entered the 5th floor of the lawless tower. Senior sister Yinshaw asked Jiang Hao to wait outside while she escorted the visitors. Only after delivering the guests into the tower did she come back and explain why she had called him here. "Can you get Yin Zichen to speak up and reveal what he stole from the Mountain Seasword sect?" she asked. Jiang Hao felt helpless. "Don't worry too much, junior brother. If he doesn't speak, well, just hand him over to them. It's not a big deal. Just do what you can," said senior sister Yinshaw with a smile. After all, he had been captured by the sect, so getting a bit less in ransom wasn't a significant issue. Jiang Hao didn't know what to say. Yin Zichen's value was to be sold for money, and if he found out about it, he might have mixed feelings about it. This could become quite troublesome. Chapter 737, Facing Yin Zichen. Upon learning about his task, Jiang Hao proceeded toward the prison cells. Yin Zichen didn't feel hopeless about his situation. His faith lay in finding the heart of 5 elements. That was his last resort. Once he lost that, he would lose all hope. It was impossible to make him surrender one of the heart of 5 elements. He drew closer to the prison, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. Yin Zichen, with disheveled hair, sat in the cell. The arrival of Mu Longyu and Mi Lingyu attracted everyone's attention. Surprisingly, Zhong Yong was still present. "Fellow disciple, you've finally come. I've been waiting for you for so long," said Zhong Yong when he saw Jiang Hao. "Senior, haven't you returned to your sect yet?" asked Jiang Hao. If the Sunset Immortal sect came to redeem their member, there shouldn't be any problem. Maybe they had chosen not to come get him. Zhong Yong had quite a reputation, so the Sunset Immortal sect wouldn't just ignore him. Moreover, despite its flaws, an immortal sect was still an immortal sect, and there were righteous people among them. There was nothing wrong with rescuing Zhong Yong. "He refuses to leave until he sees you. He's determined to stay here. Nobody in the tower can convince him otherwise," said Nangongyu. At this point, Mu Longyu and Mi Lingyu also turned their attention to Jiang Hao. They were speaking quietly with Hai Luo and didn't expect Jiang Hao to be there as well. In fact, Mu Longyu had heard that Jiang Hao held a high status on the 5th floor. But no matter how much he had heard about him, he couldn't fully believe that this person could be so remarkable. As for Zhong Yong, he had heard some things about him as well. He was known as a figure of pure virtue and a beacon of righteousness. Jiang Hao sighed inwardly. Indeed, he felt sorry for this person. Everyone around watched quietly. They were curious to see what would happen. After all, Zhong Yong was determined to stay, and no amount of persuasion would change his mind. Although they didn't understand why, Jiang Hao had to compromise and make a promise. Jiang Hao wasn't concerned about that. He drew closer to Zhong Yong and whispered softly, "Senior, if you don't return now, your cave might be occupied by your fellow sect members, and your place of seclusion." "Stop. Stop." Before Jiang Hao could finish speaking, Zhong Yong shouted, "Help! Help! I want to leave. I want to leave. Get me out quickly." Now, Zhong Yong couldn't wait to leave. He didn't want to stay here for even a moment longer. The people around him were taken aback. Mu Longyu was shocked. Just a few words and the most stubborn disciple was ready to leave. How did he do it? The prisoners' shouts and screams couldn't be heard outside. So, Jiang Hao went to find senior sister Yinshaw for the old man. She listened in confusion. She had asked for his help with Yin Zichen, not Zhong Yong. Before Zhong Yong left, he glared at Jiang Hao as if to say, "You better not deceive me." "Don't worry, senior," said Jiang Hao. "Have a safe trip." It was only then that Zhongyong felt relaxed enough to leave. Senior sister Yinshaw was very curious about how Jiang Hao had managed to achieve this, but after cooperating for so long, she naturally wouldn't ask him about it. This wasn't something that she could ask. If she did, he might not be willing to help her in the future. They operated with mutual understanding and trust. Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He was concerned that senior sister Yinshaw might ask him about it, but she didn't. While he could initially rely on luck and coincidence, he couldn't do so now. He indeed had some extraordinary abilities, but he couldn't tell anyone about it. Thankfully, nobody asked any further questions. Everyone preferred to maintain things as they were at the present. After that, Jiang Hao turned and walked to the other prison cell. This time, everyone looked at him differently. Yin Zichen and Wu Yang were surprised. They had seen Zhong Yang's stubbornness. This person had changed his mind so quickly. Even King Hai Luo was wary of this person. "I'm sorry if that disturbed you, Senior," Jiang Hao said to Mu Longyu. "Not at all." Mu Longyu shook his head. Mi Lingyu glanced at Hai Luo. "Heavenly King Hai Luo, aren't you even going to greet your fellow king?" Hai Luo scoffed. "If not for this cell door protecting you, you wouldn't be laughing at me. You too think you can scold me? Hai Luo, you weren't like this before." Mu Longyu frowned slightly. "I've had enough," Mi Lingyu said. "Let him come over here. Then, Hai Luo will be more forthcoming." "If you could understand everything about me, I wouldn't be a king here," said Hai Luo. "Guess what I discovered in the Great Thousand God sect and the end of all things?" Mi Lingyu asked. "What did you find?" Jiang Hao paid no attention to the dispute and approached Yin Zichen. He was thinking about how to make the other party speak up. Yin Zichen instinctively tensed up when he saw Jiang Hao approach. Before, he had wanted Jiang Hao to visit him, but now, he was nervous. He had found out something. Jiang Hao only visited this place under the orders of the Lawless Tower. If the tower didn't instruct it, he wouldn't bother. "Little friend, did you come to see me?" Yin Zichen asked. Wu Yang noticed that Yin Zichen was nervous. Only those who had secrets seemed nervous when Jiang Hao approached them. It meant Yin Zichen had something to hide. Hai Luo and the others watched. Mi Lingyu pulled Mu Longyu along to watch the show. This was the most interesting and crucial moment, especially since it tested the will of the powerful. Would Yin Zichen falter, or would he remain composed? Mu Longyu frowned but remained silent. "Senior, are you from the Mountain Sea Sword sect?" Jiang Hao asked. He was unsure how to broach the topic. "Yes. I guess you are here to ask me where the stolen thing is." Yin Zichen chuckled. "I don't have it. I didn't steal it. Even if you hand me over to them, it won't matter because I don't know." "Ah, I see." Jiang Hao lowered his head. "Would you tell me if you knew, Senior?" Yin Zichen looked skeptical. "Of course, I would. Do you think I'm willingly waiting for death here?" Jiang Hao looked at him in silence for a long time. Finally, he reached out and made a gesture. Yin Zichen was stunned, and others also became tense. The atmosphere changed instantly. When Jiang Hao beckoned a prisoner, it was over for them. Mu Longyu felt uneasy. He could sense that everyone was nervous, including Mi Lingyu. She gripped his arm tightly. "What do you want to say to me?" Yin Zichen pretended to be calm. "I just want to tell you a fact, Senior," Jiang Hao said in surprise. "You're the first person who is actually willing to listen to me." Then, he leaned closer and whispered, "Beneath the Chaos Stone Island, in the Sunset Sword Tomb." Chapter 738. The King's Gaze. Jiang Hao sighed inwardly. If it were an ordinary time, he would greet the other party using the Heart of Five Elements. He wouldn't directly touch upon the person's bottom line. That wouldn't be beneficial for either of them, especially for those who might be able to leave. It would be quite troublesome. For Mi Lingyu, there was no other way. Only her son's name could move her. Zhuang Yuzhen was different. It involved gradually drawing the others' attention and then undermining their inner thoughts but always leaving a glimmer of hope. Although he knew about Mi Lingyu's son, he still didn't know the child's specific location, so she didn't have to worry too much. However, Yin Zichen was different from these people. He was being directly hit. It was quite a blow. This made it very difficult for him to speak up. Jiang Hao was unsure how he would react. He could only take a step back and stand quietly. Upon hearing Jiang Hao's words, despair appeared in Yin Zichen's eyes. It was more absolute than death itself. He instinctively took a few steps back and finally sat against the wall. His face darkened. He looked desolate. This change made everyone shudder, especially Wu Yang. He had actually attempted to provoke the person in front of him before. Now, it seemed wise to avoid any provocation if possible. Senior, there's no need to be disheartened. Perhaps, before long, you will be able to leave. It's not entirely hopeless, Jiang Hao said as he looked at him. Hope. Yin Zichen looked up at the person in front of him with some regret. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have willingly let him try the power of the king. It won't be long before you can leave, Senior, Jiang Hao said. What do you mean? Yin Zichen frowned and looked at Jiang Hao. He genuinely didn't understand the meaning behind Jiang Hao's words. It depends on your own choice, Jiang Hao said. If he agreed to hand over a certain item, he would probably be rescued by Gui. There was still hope. Not handing it over would extinguish that hope. Even the most foolish person would know how to make a safe choice. Jiang Hao turned to look at Mi Lingyu and the others. The latter instinctively retreated behind Mu Longyu. Do you guarantee it? Yin Zichen asked as he looked at Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao glanced at him but did not answer. Then, he turned his gaze to Heavenly King Hai Luo. Hai Luo stopped breathing momentarily. I've been speaking softly recently. I admit I used to speak a bit loudly. How about I don't speak at all? Heavenly King Hai Luo asked tentatively. Maybe I shouldn't talk. Jiang Hao wanted to inquire about the matter of becoming an immortal, but ultimately, as a Golden Core Realm cultivator, it wasn't suitable to ask such questions. Finally, he left some wine for Zhuang Yuzhen and informed him that the Corpse Realm flowers were about to bloom. Perhaps people from the Divine Corpse sect might come soon. Zhuang Yuzhen understood Jiang Hao's intention. He could redeem himself with his sect. But he was still concerned about something. Did you make a decision? Senior, what do you mean? Jiang Hao asked. He seemed to have nothing to consider. I want to take a look at the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, Zhuang Yuzhen said. Jiang Hao was puzzled. I cannot make decisions on that front. This person should be aware that the flower was with him, but he wasn't the owner. Zhuang Yuzhen was quite surprised. Ask someone from the Lawless Tower. Jiang Hao became even more puzzled. Then, he bid farewell to Mu Longyu and Mi Lingyu and left. Outside, senior sister Yinshaw thought of something. I've been too busy lately and forgot to tell you something, junior brother Jiang. Zhuang Yuzhen wants to see the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, and Elder Beiji's instructions are to follow your orders. Follow my orders? Jiang Hao was shocked. Was he really that trusted? Elder Beiji was indeed bold. She even dared to entrust him with such decisions. Should he agree? After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hao once again approached Zhuang Yuzhen. He used his ability to appraise him. There was no special change. His appraisal showed him that the other person really just wanted to see the divine flower and nothing else. He wanted to see it because that flower had changed his life. Jiang Hao said softly, Senior, get ready. He then turned and left. Zhuang Yuzhen let out a sigh of relief. Indeed, the Lawless Tower hadn't conveyed the message at all. Old rascal, you're getting what you wished for, Heavenly King Hai Luo said. When will I get what I wish for? He still refuses to talk to me. Nangong Yu sighed. She had waited a long time just to know what that person had said. But she never got an answer. Mu Longyu lowered his head. The others didn't know what he was thinking. After advising Heavenly King Hai Luo, he left. He had agreed to visit this sect and teach the other person a lesson, but he didn't. Kings shouldn't clash unnecessarily. It benefited no one. However, Mu Longyu wasn't sparing Hai Luo because he wanted to. After all, currently, all 11 kings wanted to discipline Hai Luo, and his taking action wouldn't bring any consequences. The reason he didn't act was that he had lost interest. Other matters had aroused greater interest in him. As they prepared to leave, Lingyu couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you teach King Hai Luo a lesson?" She had always wanted to reprimand him. His behavior on the 5th floor had been unbearable. It's useless to teach Heavenly King Hai Luo a lesson. He won't leave willingly. He won't beg for mercy even if he is beaten half to death, unless that golden core realm cultivator does it. "Why do I feel like you're troubled?" Lingyu asked. Mu Longyu nodded. "Before meeting that golden core realm cultivator, I didn't have many thoughts. But after seeing him, I thought of something." "What is it?" Lingyu felt curious. The other was indeed extraordinary, but was there anything important associated with him? "Do you remember how he made people submit to him?" Mu Longyu asked. "By revealing secrets. It was like he was able to discern deep-seated weaknesses in people," Lingyu said. At that time, she had been absolutely sure there was no issue, but she had still compromised just to be safe. "Yes. It's not easy to get to know these things. So, there might be an exceptional figure behind him, someone who knows countless secrets of the world." Mu Longyu looked at the woman beside him. Such a person may not be the strongest, but they have information, broad insights, and knowledge beyond others. "Do you know what that implies?" he asked. "What?" Lingyu asked. "Do you think he knows about the Great Thousand God sect?" Mu Longyu suddenly asked. Lingyu was stunned. "You mean to ask him?" Lingyu had been seeking a way to break free from the Great Thousand God sect. She had learned some things from Madame Gong, but none were useful. She wouldn't resort to them unless absolutely necessary. "Yes. Perhaps he is the right person to talk to about this matter," Mu Longyu said. "No." Lingyu shook her head. "I've investigated him. Outside, he seems like an ordinary disciple. It's only inside the lawless tower that he becomes somewhat special. This indicates that someone either restricts him, or he doesn't want to mention these matters outside. Almost no one from the lawless tower has any hope of leaving. So, the restrictions don't affect him. Outside the tower, he might not bring up anything at all." "What do you mean?" Mu Longyu frowned. "Lawless tower voluntarily for a reason." Chapter 739, The Records of the Sages. 1. After leaving the lawless tower, Jiang Hao returned to his residence. This time on the 5th floor, he had indeed accomplished quite a lot. Chang Yang had been sent off, and there was a high probability that Yin Zichen would leave too. His only regret was that he hadn't obtained anything particularly useful from them. From Chang Yang, he learned about Feng Hua's plans, and from Yin Zichen, he managed an exchange through Gui but only for an acceptable reward. Overall, it wasn't a loss. Sending those people off was beneficial. Fewer people meant fewer troubles. That would allow him to continue cultivating in the spirit herb garden. He could also proceed with awakening the beast's bloodline. However, he was still short of spirit stones. He currently had 50,000, but he needed 10,000 more. Selling the items left by Chen Chen would easily fulfill this need. However, it couldn't be sold within the sect. That meant he had to craft talismans to earn spirit stones. At present, he could produce some high-quality talismans. With a bit over 10,000 needed, he probably wouldn't have to wait until next year. Moreover, there was a heavenly rejuvenating pill that could also be sold. Recently, he hadn't done much, or else he wouldn't be so lacking. There was also a bit of trouble. He had to prepare the September spring tea. Otherwise, he might get into trouble. Thinking it over, he realized that he was still massively short on spirit stones. The days that followed became peaceful, and Jiang Hao contemplated entering the blood pool again. Upon visiting the law enforcement peak, he discovered that a mission to Devil's Den was available in 3 days. He could join in. He began crafting talismans for sale. Aside from the fine grade 6 talismans, he began to mass-produce Golden Core 6 talismans. There was a considerable price difference, so producing more Golden Core 6 talismans was preferable. However, there was a problem. Senior brother Duan Guan and senior sister Leng Tian were not progressing quickly enough in their cultivation. They couldn't keep up with the production of some of the higher-grade talismans. Therefore, having fewer of the fine grade 6 talismans was not an option because they could bring in quite a lot of spirit stones. Others purchasing 1 or 2 golden core 6 talismans couldn't compare to senior brother Duan Guan and the others in terms of wealth. The fine grade 6 talismans were mainly crafted for the last 3 talismans. The 10,000 swords talisman, the earth-shattering talisman, and the power-controlling talismans usually sold for around 60 spirit stones each. Apart from these, there were healing talismans, which sold for about 30 spirit stones and occasionally reached 50 during conflicts and battles. As for the golden core 6 talismans, the first 3 talismans created were the heavenly sword talisman, the evil breaking talisman, and the rejuvenation talisman. The heavenly sword talisman was an improvement of the 10,000 swords talisman, while the rejuvenation talisman could heal wounds and restore plant vitality. It was more useful than healing talismans. The evil breaking talisman, as its name suggested, dispelled malevolent forces. Its effect was average, but it had many uses for those who didn't know many techniques. They sold for about 90 spirit stones each. After some thought, Jiang Hao decided not to sell the evil breaking talisman. There had to be some drawbacks for others. 3 days later, the people for the Devil's Den mission gathered. Putting down his talisman pen, Jiang Hao tidied up the spirit herb garden and headed straight for Devil's Den. He entered the cave as he had done many times before, then found a suitable place to open the path to the blood pool. As for other fellow sect members who entered, all were at Foundation Establishment realm, so there wasn't too much to worry about. However, he still needed to be vigilant against them. Otherwise, one day in the future, he would certainly suffer. After a while, Jiang Hao once again walked on the blood-stained path. Just like before, everything went smoothly. He encountered the figure of Ji Yujin just like before. The latter slowly opened his eyes and was somewhat surprised to see Jiang Hao. "Is this your house?" he asked. He came and went as he pleased. Jiang Hao looked at the figure without noticing any changes. "Senior, it's good to see you remain the same," said Jiang Hao. Ji Yujin stared at him intently. He seemed to see through him. "How did you manage to come and go as you please?" "Perhaps it's bad luck," Jiang Hao said. "If it was good luck, why would someone end up in such an ominous place?" Ji Yujin chuckled. He felt the other knew the reason but didn't press further. "What are you here for this time?" "There's no one here anymore," he said. "I want to go inside." "Senior, do you have any advice for me?" Jiang Hao remained calm. He intended to check the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. "Go inside." Ji Yujin was astonished. "Did you sense any changes inside?" This time, Jiang Hao was surprised. "Changes inside? What kind of changes?" "Senior, I don't know what you mean. Please enlighten me," he said. He genuinely didn't know the situation inside. Faced with such a ferocious creature, he didn't dare to be lax. He didn't feign arrogance. One misstep could bring disaster. "You don't know?" Ji Yujin asked curiously. "Then, why did you come?" "I came for something else." "I'm worried that it might affect me," Jiang Hao said respectfully. "It seems you discovered something inside." Ji Yujin smiled. "Since you seek advice from me, can I ask you something in return?" "Of course." Jiang Hao nodded. Every gift should have a price. Ji Yujin looked at the person before him in surprise. "Have you recently had contact with anyone from the Astronomical Academy?" Jiang Hao shook his head. The Astronomical Academy was in the west. It was quite far away from the southern region. He couldn't get in touch with them even if he wanted to. In that case, try to make contact. Ji Yujin thought for a moment, then he took out a book. "Give them this book. I wrote it years ago. I can't leave, but there is no reason for the book to be stuck here with me." Jiang Hao took the book and glanced at the title. Emblazoned on it were the words, "Ancient and Modern Book." Wasn't this the book Zhong wanted? She mentioned that a person took the book away. Was she referring to Ji Yujin? Chapter 740, The Records of the Sages, page 2. It didn't seem likely. Ji Yujin mentioned that he was a respected figure, while Zhong had a thief who had stolen the book. As for the exact situation, Jiang Hao was unaware. However, this wasn't a difficult task. Moreover, Zhong was probably someone from the Astronomical Academy. The people in the gathering weren't simple at all. "I promise to deliver this, Senior," said Jiang Hao. "I won't make things difficult for you either. Tell me, what else do you need?" Ji Jin asked. Jiang Hao looked at the person before him and fell silent. In truth, he didn't want anything. Last time he got the person's name and that didn't resolve anything. The more things he acquired, the more trouble it might bring. However, there was one thing he wanted to ask about. "Senior, do you know about records from the Sage's Book?" "The Sage's Book?" Ji Jin furrowed slightly. "Are those pages appearing now?" Jiang Hao nodded. He was puzzled. "Senior, are you worried by them appearing?" Jiang Hao asked. "What do you think is in the Sage's Book?" Ji Jin asked. "Records of mantras maybe, or even history of our ancestors." Jiang Hao said doubtfully. Ji Jin shook his head with a sigh. "Yes and no. The appearance of the Sage's Book is not a good sign. Whenever it appears, it brings about a huge change. The last time the pages appeared, they described the Heavenly Tao Foundation Establishment Grand Earth Emperor. At that time, the Heavenly Tao Foundation Establishment had not yet appeared, but the Grand Earth Emperor emerged. The Emperor suppressed many clans. He not only became the Emperor but also controlled the fortunes of the world. Isn't that a good thing?" Jiang Hao learned for the first time that the Sage's Book documented such things. "A good thing?" Ji Jin smiled. "Do you know what other things the Sage's Book has recorded?" "What?" Jiang Hao asked. "Do you know about the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl?" Ji Jin asked. Jiang Hao was stunned. "It seems you do know." Ji Jin nodded. "Yes. The Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl is also recorded on the pages of the Sage's Book. It is said that during that era, numerous powerful clans were at war. This allowed endless massacres, so the Misfortune Pearl emerged. At that moment, all the clans ceased fighting and united to survive." Ji Jin chuckled. "Do you still think it's a good thing when the Sage's Book appears? If the pages document these kinds of things, why do many people seem to know about them? And why are they in the West? Is it related to the Astronomical Academy?" Jiang Hao asked. The Astronomical Academy has its own pages of the Sage's Book. They were treasures left behind by the Academy's predecessors. But they're not genuine pages from the Sage's Book. Ji Jin hesitated. However, some seniors at the Astronomical Academy know the true origin of these pages. It's not about the strength of cultivation but rather the level of understanding of their contents. And these knowledgeable individuals leave the Academy to expand their own influence. The Heavenly Tower. Jiang Hao immediately thought of that. The first master was a senior of the Astronomical Academy who even entered the Abyssal Sea. If what you say is true, is the cultivation world going to face a disaster? Jiang Hao asked. Of course not, Ji Jin said. The pages of the Sage's Book also record culinary arts, poetry, architecture, and magical artifacts. But it's been a long time since they last appeared, which always makes people feel uneasy. And it's hard to say who gets them. Jiang Hao lowered his head. How do these pages appear? He asked. Ji Jin shook his head. Jiang Hao wasn't sure whether he didn't know about it or was refusing to reveal an answer. However, he could ask Hong Yuye. She might provide some clues. Senior, could you tell me what happened inside the blood pool? Jiang Hao changed the topic. Ji Jin turned to look behind him. Something inside has drawn close and has caused the blood pool to stir. If this influence persists, I'm unsure what consequences it will bring, Ji Jin said with concern. If the blood pool flowed outward, the consequences would be disastrous. However, there was one thing he didn't explicitly mention. The blood pool was stable now. At first, he was puzzled, but now he understood. It was because of the arrival of the person before him. But he was still uncertain how that had happened. Jiang Hao furrowed his brows. Something was drawing near and causing changes in the blood pool. One thing was for sure. It must be the doing of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. The changes began after he arrived. It might mean that the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl sensed the fragment of the Earth Extreme Heart-Devouring Pearl. As a result, it was approaching this place. The confrontation between the blood pool and the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl would undoubtedly cause disastrous reactions. Once the seal was broken, the consequences would be unimaginable. He must find a way to stabilize the situation here. Otherwise, the Heavenly Note sect will be the first to suffer. The one who would be at a disadvantage was himself. "Are you going inside to check the situation?" Jiyu Jin asked. Jiang Hao nodded. After that, he bid farewell and left. Jiyu Jin frowned. He realized that the changes here emerged after this person had arrived. But he didn't exactly know why. There were many secrets here, but he fell into them too early. If the other party had visited twice, there might be a chance for a third meeting. The more they met, the more he would guide the person towards the astronomical academy. That was the only thing he could do as a scholar. After bidding farewell to Jiyu Jin, Jiang Hao walked inside. He took out the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, and the waves in the blood pool calmed beneath his feet. He traveled quickly along this path. Before long, he reached the end of the blood pool. When he arrived there, he was stunned. He was afraid. The purple energy in his body was running wildly. It felt as if his feet would lose their power to stand upright. At that moment, his gaze was completely occupied by an immensely huge green sphere that seemed to dominate the heavens. It was the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. The pearl, which had been distant like the sun before, had approached the blood pool at some point. It occupied half of the sky and created an overwhelming feeling of dread. This wasn't just a sphere. It was a constellation. Looking at the green sphere, Jiang Hao found himself unable to contend with it. Such vastness and terror were beyond anything he had ever seen. His own power was too weak. It was no wonder all things would eventually perish under it. It was also no surprise that the senior Dan Yuan and others didn't want it to break the seal. The ignorant are fearless. Jiang Hao had worries, but he had never been so frightened before. He had sealed the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl. It had stayed sealed after that. That had made him think that such items weren't very dangerous if he handled them with caution. But the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was terrifying. He could die at any moment. The pearl occupied everything and was about to touch the blood pool. Jiang Hao didn't know what to do. Perhaps soon, the two sides would collide. Would the seal break then? At that moment, he took out the fragment of the Earth Extreme Heart-Devouring Pearl. For a moment, the fragment showed a reaction, as if it could break the seal at any moment. Seeing this, he had no choice but to put it away immediately. So, it's because of the Earth Extreme Heart-Devouring Pearl, Jiang Hao stood rooted in place for a long time. He felt as if the huge pearl was staring at him. I must find a solution. He could only ask Hong Yuye about this matter, and time was running short. He never expected that his casual visit would bring such trouble upon himself. After that, he left the blood pool. He appeared once again in Devil's Den. His eyes fell on the deeper part of Devil's Den where the stars were reversed, and their radiance struggled to escape. Presumably, there were even more dreadful things there. Perhaps the seal of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl is there. But the Earth Extreme Heart-Devouring Pearl isn't complete yet, so maybe it's not there after all. Jiang Hao sighed heavily. He could only leave for now. On the way, he encountered 5 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. It reminded him of the first time he came here. Back then, he was only in the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment Realm and was facing late-stage Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. It's only been a dozen years, and I'm already facing the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. He felt quite sentimental. Clearly, what he wanted was neither brilliance nor fame. However, many things happened that made him act anyway. Unknowingly, he had already done a lot. Chapter 741, Finding a Way to Mine. Jiang Hao vanished from the spot. When he reappeared, he was back in his own courtyard. Only then did he retract the Thousand Faces treasure fan and return to his house. He sat down in the courtyard and gazed absent-mindedly at the peach tree. His discoveries during the outing made his heart race. They also made him understand that with insufficient strength, exploring exceedingly powerful things shouldn't be attempted at all. It could lead to trouble. With a sigh, Jiang Hao intended to sell the heaven rejuvenating pill. He wanted to gather enough to awaken the beast's bloodline so that he could get a golden bubble. He would get a new treasure. Judging from previous experiences, he knew that treasures emerged from golden bubbles. The primordial heavenly blade, the 9 golden rings, and the immortal mountain sea shield had all emerged from golden bubbles. There had been only one purple gold bubble, so he still didn't know how they worked. Apart from the beast, he also needed to wait for Hong Yuye to arrive and inquire about the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. However, it was uncertain when she would come. He could only wait. After 2 days of waiting, she still didn't visit. Senior sister Ju Chan arrived instead. They met at the entrance to the Spirit Herb Garden. "Is there a reason for your sudden visit, Senior? Can I help with anything?" Jiang Hao asked. Senior sister Ju Chan had already reached the early stage of the Golden Core realm. Normally, upon successful advancement, one's cultivation would skyrocket. However, there seemed to be no signs of such progress from her. It was puzzling. Perhaps she didn't want it herself. "I came to give something to you, junior brother. I also have a message for you," she said as she took out a square box and handed it to him. Jiang Hao knew it was a reward for growing the divine flower. It had been a long time since he had received one. He felt embarrassed to accept it. He hadn't made much progress with the heavenly fragrance Dao flower and hadn't even tended to it much. Still, he accepted the reward because this treasure set was very powerful. The belt might bring about some significant effects. "I heard Lin Ji is mining?" Ju Chan asked. "Yes. He's cultivating there." Jiang Hao nodded. There was nothing wrong with mining. It allowed Lin Ji to refine himself better and avoid people who constantly bullied him. After all, most of the miners were prisoners at lower levels and couldn't bully him. Of course, the downside was that nobody managed that place properly, so there was danger at every corner. Lin Ji seemed to be at the lifeblood refinement realm, but he was actually at the foundation establishment realm, so there wasn't much danger for him. Besides, the beast often went over to meet him and observe the surroundings. Occasional attacks were useful for Lin Ji to practice his newfound strength. It would prepare him for the dangers of the cultivation world. "When will you bring him back?" Ju Chan asked. Junior sister Zhao wanted to know, so I'm asking. Why didn't she ask herself? Jiang Hao wondered. Ju Chan shook her head. Jiang Hao could understand. The difference between the two had grown, and perhaps a meeting might be embarrassing for one of them. It was better to not meet. Besides, Lin Ji still felt guilty. Meeting each other would unearth guilt and remorse and make it worse for both of them. "I'll go over to check on his situation in a few days," Jiang Hao said. He suddenly remembered something. If he went to visit Lin Ji and found him mining, should he talk to him? That's great. Although junior sister Zhao isn't going to meet him, she's still very concerned about junior brother Lin Ji. Ju Chan smiled. Jiang Hao nodded. Ju Chan looked at Jiang Hao. "Junior brother Jiang, you seem to have remained the same." "What do you mean, senior sister?" Jiang Hao was puzzled. "Nothing. It's just a passing thought. The real matter is that Elder Baiji asked me to inform you that your guest is arriving tonight, so prepare to welcome them," Ju Chan said. After that, she bid farewell to Jiang Hao and left. Watching her leave, Jiang Hao let out a sigh. Senior sister Ju Chan was undoubtedly a good person, but this was a demonic sect, and it was somewhat dangerous for her here. Jiang Hao began to focus on tonight's event. The so-called guest should be Zhuang Yuzhen. He was coming to see the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, and he wondered what his reaction would be upon seeing the flower. Originally a strong cultivator, he had become a prisoner due to this flower. His cultivation was also crippled. Without power and status, his future would be hard. The corpse heart was his last hope, but there had been no response for so many years. He probably would find it exceedingly difficult for a rebirth. Everything was normal in the Spirit Herb Garden. Jiang Hao sought out Cheng Chou to inquire about his cultivation. Unlike others, Cheng Cho consistently had issues, and Jiang Hao would explain them to him. Some fellow disciples would also listen in. Occasionally, they would ask questions, and out of courtesy, Jiang Hao would give a brief explanation. This led to some people wanting to help in the spirit herb garden, but all offers were declined. The spirit herb garden didn't need anyone else. It required only one foundation establishment realm cultivator, which the garden already had. Now, it also had a golden core realm cultivator because Jiang Hao chose to stay. Cheng Cho helped around, but he wasn't in charge. He just liked working here and was close to Xiao Li. Xiao Li probably had no significant responsibilities. Perhaps, before long, she would also have to complete sect missions. By then, he could ask her to take the beast along. It was about time for her to start getting involved with others. At night, Jiang Hao stood at the courtyard gate and waited. In the distance, someone arrived riding a flying sword. It was senior sister Yinshaw with two others escorting Zhuang Yuzhen. The latter had numerous suppression runes on his hands and feet. For others, the lawless tower might show some leniency, but not for Zhuang Yuzhen. Junior brother Jiang, well, wait outside. If there's any problem, call us immediately, said Yinshaw as she urged Zhuang Yuzhen forward. Jiang Hao nodded. Senior, please, he said politely as she stepped aside to let Zhuang Yuzhen in. Regardless of Zhuang Yuzhen's cultivation realm, he was still a senior. Basic courtesy was still necessary. Just because someone's cultivation realm had declined didn't mean they weren't a senior anymore. Zhuang Yuzhen nodded and stepped forward. He wasn't worried about anything. The people from the Heavenly Note sect wouldn't harm him. There was no need for that now. Jiang Hao followed him inside. As soon as they entered the courtyard, Zhuang Yuzhen frowned. He surveyed the courtyard and was quite surprised. The spiritual energy here was rich, and there were high-grade spiritual herbs and sacred medicines. Finally, his gaze fell on the peach tree. It looked ordinary, but he knew it wasn't. Senior, the flower is over there, Jiang Hao said. With that, Zhuang Yuzhen followed Jiang Hao and saw a flower with only 7 leaves. That was the heavenly fragrance Dao flower he had been thinking about all these years. It didn't seem particularly special, but it was indeed a divine object. Zhuang Yuzhen chuckled and sat down. Looking at this sapling-like little flower, he couldn't help but sigh. If I had been a bit more cautious back then, would I have ended up like this? Jiang Hao also sat down and recalled everything. He felt quite sentimental. Fortune is where misfortune lurks, and misfortune is where fortune lies. Life was always uncertain. Chapter 742. A request from the heavenly King. Zhuang Yuzhen shook his head and sighed. On the path of cultivation, once you fall, it's incredibly difficult to rise again. Because countless eyes are fixed on you. They all want to pounce on you, especially if you underestimate yourself. Senior, do you plan to stay in the lawless tower your whole life? Jiang Hao asked as he took out some wine. My whole life. Zhuang Yuzhen took the wine and drank it. Is there any meat? Jiang Hao took out some jerky he had saved for Xiao Li. Zhuang Yuzhen suddenly laughed as he ate the meat and drank the wine. My greatest dream before cultivating was to eat a lot of meat and drink a lot of wine. Unfortunately, I never managed it, even after achieving my cultivation. Why not? Jiang Hao asked. Zhuang Yuzhen smiled bitterly. No reason. I just felt it was childish. Jiang Hao remained silent. What about you? What were your wishes when you were young? Zhuang Yuzhen suddenly asked. Thinking back to his childhood, Jiang Hao smiled. Eating a lot of meat. Is that all? Zhuang Yuzhen asked. Yeah, that's it. I really wanted to eat meat and good food back then. Did you finally get to eat everything you wanted? I did. Once, Jiang Hao felt his stepmother was unreasonable and mistreated him behind his father's back. Now, when he recalled everything, it seemed all right. After all, he wasn't her biological child, yet she took care of him since he was born. He often got scolded, but he did grow up in peace. Remembering the closed door at home, he sighed in his heart. He couldn't go back anymore. Many times, he wished to see them again. He couldn't recall his father's appearance. The last memory of him was when he was sold, which made him feel regretful. With time that passed, some grievances dissipated. Jiang Hao wanted to put a perfect end to his childhood. Isn't the Divine Corpse sect an immortal sect? Can't you return there? Jiang Hao asked. Even in immortal sects, there are open fights, hidden struggles, and many enemies. Zhuang Yuzhen sighed. Moreover, people were always after my status and position in the sect. Now that my cultivation realm is low, why go back to invite trouble? Staying in the tower would be less worrisome. Do you know if the mysterious person who told you about the heavenly fragrance Dao flower is powerful? Jiang Hao asked. He knew Zhuang Yuzhen wouldn't provide any details, but getting a general idea was still helpful for him. Jiang Hao agreed with Zhuang Yuzhen's decision to stay in the lawless tower. The cultivation world was full of dangers, and getting stronger was more for survival than anything else. Staying put at the tower ensured survival, but it was hard to see any hope there. Leaving would mean struggle, and the risks were higher. It was a matter of personal choice. Zhuang Yuzhen chuckled. Perhaps. Jiang Hao smiled but didn't press further. Have you ever encountered the natives in the corpse realm speaking? Zhuang Yuzhen asked. Jiang Hao looked at him in confusion. They speak the language of the Heavenly Spirits tribe, but with your current knowledge of the Heavenly Spirits tribe language, you can't translate it. It needs to be translated in reverse, Zhuang Yuzhen muttered to himself. It's something few people know about. I discovered it accidentally. But even if you hear them, it's rare to hear anything secretive. Jiang Hao appeared calm but was shocked. The reason he couldn't translate what he heard wasn't due to a lack of knowledge. It required reverse translation due to the sequence issue and different pronunciations. The corpse realm is far more complicated than you think. Zhuang Yuzhen sighed. Do you know why the higher your cultivation realm is, the less you are allowed entry into the corpse realm? Normally, the limit is at the return to void realm. Going higher requires self-restraint, but many times, even the return to void realm cultivators can't use all their power to enter. I didn't know about it. Please enlighten me, senior, said Jiang Hao. It's because of the sea, Zhuang Yuzhen said. Sea? Jiang Hao asked in confusion. Yes, the sea, Zhuang Yuzhen said. When entering at the return to void realm, you might see a vast sea. Once you accidentally enter, there's no chance for a comeback. The higher the cultivation, the more likely you'll enter this sea. Unless you have the strength to cross it, they won't let high-level cultivators in. Jiang Hao was surprised. The people who didn't come out, or those who disappeared along with the heavenly steely mountain, they might have entered this sea. There's a possibility. But no one has reappeared to confirm the truth, so it remains a mystery, Zhuang Yuzhen said while sipping his wine. Jiang Hao lowered his head, then he remembered Hong Yuye. She must know about that sea. Perhaps he could ask her. However, what the corpse realm hid wasn't essential to him. Knowing a bit more was mainly to consider the corpse realm as a backup plan. If one day he was being pursued, he could try hiding in the corpse realm. It would make it difficult for others to find him. Zhuang Yuzhen spent the whole night gazing at the flower. Finally, he left. Jiang Hao didn't know what he was thinking but understood his situation. Being so close, yet unable to attain one's desires. The feeling was always despairing. In the early hours of the morning, Jiang Hao watched as senior sister Yinshaw escorted Zhuang Yuzhen away. To Jiang Hao's surprise, as Zhuang Yuzhen left, he met Mu Longyu. Fortunately, they met in the lawless tower, so it wouldn't affect Jiang Hao much. He had encountered many powerful individuals. There were the members of the Mountain Sea Sword sect, the Clear Sky School sect, and the kings from overseas. These encounters could bring unnecessary trouble. Fortunately, most of them were in seclusion. However, it would be better to detach himself from these individuals and their situations as soon as possible. On the 5th floor of the lawless tower, Jiang Hao looked at Mu Longyu and Mi Lingyu respectfully. Do you have something to discuss with me, seniors? He asked politely. No need for such formality, friend, said Mu Longyu politely. His polite attitude made Jiang Hao wary. Did he need something from him? Is there something you wish to ask, senior? Jiang Hao asked. Indeed, Mu Longyu said. I presume you know my wife? Jiang Hao nodded. And do you know about her origins? Mu Longyu asked. This time, Jiang Hao didn't speak. It's like this. Mu Longyu wasn't bothered by Jiang Hao's silence. We want to be together. Do you have any methods to help us? Jiang Hao understood. Mu Longyu hoped he could help Mi Lingyu break free from the control of the Great Thousand God sect. However, he had no idea how to do that. It seemed impossible. Perhaps he could appraise her and find out something. Jiang Hao glanced at Mi Lingyu beside him and activated his power. He used the daily appraisal. Mi Lingyu, a disciple of the Great Thousand God sect. She was planted as a spy by Mu Longyu's side. She unexpectedly became his partner. She gave birth to his son, Mu Yin. She hopes to escape from the influence of her sect to make sure her child grows up happy and safe. She came here with Mu Longyu to teach King Hai Luo a lesson. However, her husband sensed someone powerful might be backing you up. He hopes to use your help to free her from the control of the Great Thousand God sect. Staying in the Lawless Tower will give you a chance to observe the control methods of the Great Thousand God sect. Chapter 743, Paving the Way for Xiao Li. Looking at the feedback, Jiang Hao couldn't help but sigh. The Lawless Tower was truly powerful. It could suppress all sorts of things. He wasn't sure if it could also suppress the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. Otherwise, it could be offered to the sect. However, the Heavenly Note sect loved to fight. If they had such a pearl, they would expand their influence further. This would make the spiritual medicine garden exceptionally busy, which would not be conducive to his peaceful life. It was somewhat regrettable. Jiang Hao contemplated with a lowered brow. Mu Longyu had noticed that someone was backing him, which wasn't surprising. Being on the 5th floor signified that he had certain secrets. The others from the Lawless Tower should have noticed, but his identity wasn't an issue. At least, he wasn't a traitor. Although there were suspicions, the Law Enforcement Hall didn't convict him, so there wasn't an issue. Everyone tacitly refrained from asking. Do you have any insights on the matter? Mu Longyu asked. Mi Lingyu was also expectantly listening. Jiang Hao didn't answer but thought intently about it. During the appraisal, he found that Mi Lingyu was under the control of the Great Thousand God sect's spiritual technique. If she stayed in the Lawless Tower, it might help to understand the technique more. But there were man factors involved. The strength of perception determined whether detection could be successful. At least, it was very difficult for Mi Lingyu herself to perceive it. She had been in the tower for a long time. Yet, she never detected the core of the mental control technique. It was also possible that she never thought along those lines, but that still signified that it was very difficult. Have you ever thought? Jiang Hao hesitated. Please go on, Mu Longyu said. He looked pleased. As long as Jiang Hao didn't refuse outright, there was still hope. Mi Lingyu also didn't expect Jiang Hao to know about such things. Thought about what? She asked. Jiang Hao didn't want trouble on his hands. Although telling them wouldn't pose much of an issue, it could easily attract other problems. And he couldn't gain much from them. Perhaps it wasn't the case that he would gain nothing. Mi Lingyu was a master in forging, alchemy, formations, and runes. After careful consideration, he decided to express it indirectly so that he could distance himself from the matter. The Lawless Tower is remarkable. We can consider it to find a solution. The Lawless Tower? Mu Longyu furrowed his brow. That wasn't a good place. When he questioned further, Jiang Hao simply shook his head and refused to say more. Not long after, he bid farewell and left. Mu Longyu was even more puzzled. The Lawless Tower? He looked at his wife. What did you feel when you were there before? Mi Lingyu thought for a moment. During my stay, they asked me what I had been doing. I didn't think much of it then. Could it be that the Lawless Tower can suppress mind control techniques? They began to discuss it. In the tower, not only mind control techniques but also cultivation, perception, sound, and breath were all suppressed or even absorbed. So, staying in the Lawless Tower could be useful. Can one evade such control? Is it even possible to break free from it? Mu Longyu muttered. Although he didn't explicitly say it, that might be his implication. He was like that on the 5th floor. He never gave a definitive answer, he was always elusive, said Mi Lingyu. For a moment, they seemed to have found a new direction. However, they also felt uncomfortable. They had to enter the lawless tower and stay there willingly. It was similar to Heavenly King Hai Luo's situation. They began to suspect if Heavenly King Hai Luo had discovered something, which was why he wanted to stay in the lawless tower. Is he that clever? It doesn't seem very likely. Mi Lingyu refused to believe it. There is no rush. We need to think about this carefully, Mu Longyu said seriously. The lawless tower wasn't a good place. Entering it meant that one's cultivation would be disintegrated. This was an unbearable cost. If it were in their prime, they wouldn't have made this decision. Mi Lingyu's cultivation had been mostly absorbed anyway, so they could consider this option. Leaving the lawless tower, Jiang Hao headed to the law enforcement peak. He heard Xiao Li's mission was about to be issued and wanted to pay attention to it. As for Mi Lingyu and Mu Longyu, he could only go as far. He couldn't help them further. What they did next wasn't his concern. It would be beneficial if he could join them, but it would have less of an effect on him if he stayed away. At the foot of the law enforcement peak, Jiang Hao headed to the place where missions were being issued. Sure enough, there was Xiao Li's name. Cliff of Broken Hearts, Jiang Xiao Li. Heavenly Joy Pavilion, Duan Yu. Flowing Waterfall, Yu Yu. Ice Moon Valley, Zheng Shijiu. Thunder Fire Peak, Xin Yuyue. Jiang Hao was stunned. Such powerful individuals. Among the others, Xiao Li's cultivation realm was the lowest. The highest being that of senior brother Zheng Shijiu, who was probably at the Golden Core realm. Senior sisters Xin and Yu should be in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Given the right opportunities, they might have already reached their peak. As for the Heavenly Joy Pavilion's disciple, he didn't know the person. The mission was supposed to take place at Devil's Den. Weren't some people just sent there? Why are they going again? Usually, once a group was sent to Devil's Den, that was enough. A repeated mission indicated failure. Moreover, deploying someone at the Golden Core realm implied an increase in difficulty at Devil's Den. Well, following them won't do any harm. Jiang Hao was somewhat worried. It was Xiao Li's first mission, and problems could arise. Fortunately, he knew these people, so greeting them would be fine. Once Xiao Li got used to going out, a little more growth was needed and then, she could be set free. Although he was eager to set her free, it was better to be cautious. She was just like Chu Jie, who had finally become ready to venture out into the world, while Chu Chuan stayed put in the sect. Even so, Jiang Hao wasn't in a hurry to send Chu Chuan away. At least, he should reach the Golden Core realm before leaving the sect. Jiang Hao hoped that he could venture from the southern part to the eastern part. By that time, several hundred years would have passed. No one would be coming back to cause him more trouble. Several hundred years later, he would have become extremely powerful. After that, Jiang Hao visited Zheng Shijiu and explained his situation. Jiang Xiao Li? Zheng Shijiu was somewhat surprised. You know her? Jiang Hao nodded slightly but didn't say much. Jiang Xiao Li. Surname Jiang? Zheng Shijiu looked at the person in front of him and felt shocked. I heard she's only in her teens. Could she be your daughter? Jiang Hao was speechless. Senior brother Zheng's guess was absurd. Ha ha ha. I'm just kidding. I know Jiang Xiao Li was the girl you recruited into the sect. Zheng Shijiu laughed. Initially, we thought she had no talent, but in the blink of an eye, she became a true disciple. She even advanced to the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm so quickly. Xiao Li is a bit reckless. I hope you won't leave her to her devices, Jiang Hao said seriously. Junior brother, rest assured. I definitely won't, Zheng Shijiu said solemnly. Before leaving, Jiang Hao left 2 rejuvenation talismans. Later, he also sought out senior sisters Yu Yu and Xin Yuyue. Similarly, he hoped they could take care of Xiao Li and left a rejuvenation talisman for them. He even went to find Duan Yu. However, he only gave him a healing talisman. With that, he hoped everything would be fine. 2 days later, Xiao Li went to meet them with the spirit beast. Chapter 744. Meeting an old friend again. After surpassing him, Xiao Li carried the beast with her and arrived at the law enforcement peak. Beast, what should I do later? For her first task, Jiang Hao had specifically instructed her not to cause trouble for others. So, she had to ask the beast. They are all friends. Just mention Lord Beast's name, and they will show you respect, said the beast confidently. If I don't do well, will they complain to senior brother Jiang? Xiao Li asked. During her time in the outer sect, people often ran to senior brother Jiang to complain about her. These friends are discreet and won't complain, said the beast with a mouthful of carrots. Really? In the village, people used to complain to my parents. Father even hit me once. He said we shouldn't eat other people's things or stare at them while they eat. Xiao Li pouted. Later, father stopped hitting me. Even when I found branches for him, he didn't hit me. He said I had grown up, and he couldn't bear to hit me again. Does the master hit you? The beast asked. He did. Once when I sneaked out, senior brother Jiang knocked me on my head, Xiao Li said. It was the first time they met in the sect. The beast didn't pay much attention to this. Do the demons in Devil's Den live a comfortable life? Xiao Li shook her head. Before long, they arrived at the meeting point. Xiao Li saw 4 people. There were 2 men and 2 women. 3 of them seemed somewhat familiar, while one looked very pale. She immediately walked forward with the best. Hello, I'm Xiao Li. This is Beast. She even lifted the beast a bit. Zheng Shijiu looked at them and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. A golden core demon? Ims was Zhang Hao's pet, and everyone knew Lieutenant. But Tnei didn't expect it to accompany Xiao Li. They all realized that Xiao Li's relationship with Jiang Hao was extraordinary. Who is junior brother Jiang Hao to you? Asked Yu. Huh. Senior brother Jiang is my brother, said Xiao Li after thinking for a moment. He is my elder brother. Elder brother? Xin Yuyue was somewhat surprised. Did you take his surname? Yes. Xiao Li nodded. Now that everyone is here, let's set off. Junior sister Xiao Li has the lowest cultivation realm, so take care of her, Zheng Shijiu said. The others didn't have any objections, especially since they had just reconciled with each other. Duan Yu had reached the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm. He had no objections either. A middle-stage Golden Core realm cultivator had sought him out a few days before. How could he dare to have any objections? After that, the 5 of them flew on their swords. Is this junior brother Jiang Hao's spirit beast? Xin Yuyue asked. Lord Beast, if you please, said the beast. When in danger, you can mention my name. My friends and I will always help you. Any demon will show you respect after that. Zheng Shijiu and the others felt a bit awkward. Was that really effective? I have friends everywhere and demons always show me respect, said the beast again. Everyone felt the beast might be a little too fond of exaggerating things. After a while, they entered Devil's Den. According to the senior brother who managed to escape, the strength of the demons in Devil's Den isn't weak. At the very least, you need to be at the middle stage to be able to withstand them. Even late-stage cultivators might find it difficult. So, be careful, said Zheng Shijiu. He wanted to caution Xiao Li against running around, but when he saw the beast, he gave up. The beast's strength was unquestionable. That terrifying aura, even against demons, was effective. Before long, they encountered quite a few demons. Surprisingly, there were even Golden Core realm demons around. What were they doing there? How did they come to be here? Leave the Golden Core realm demons to me. Junior sister Xiao Li, stay put. Others, take care of the remaining demons, Zheng Shijiu said. Yu nodded. Okay. Xin Yuyue also unsheathed her spirit sword. Remember, aim for the neck. It's the weakest spot. Xiao Li stood still and held the beast to her. Soon, the other seniors began fighting the demons. Beast, should we help? Xiao Li asked. They are showing me respect by not letting you do anything. When someone gives that kind of respect, it's polite to just accept it, said the beast emphatically. It's a bit strange, Xiao Li said. Whenever she was in a fight, she would charge ahead in any situation. Soon, the demons were dealt with. Junior sister Xiao Li, stay alert. If any demons break through our defense, you'll have to handle it yourself, Zhang Shijiu said. Xiao Li nodded eagerly. Xiao Li and the beast left, while Jiang Hao continued with his daily routine. He watered the divine flower and tended to the spirit herbs. The matter with the lawless tower had been resolved. King Mu Longyu hadn't come looking for him again. All that was left was to earn spirit stones. Once he had enough, he could tie up the spirit beast and awaken its bloodline again. Jiang Hao remembered Lin Ji. He asked Cheng Chou about his situation. He's peacefully mining. Since his cultivation has remained at the lifeblood refinement realm, many people know him. He's often bullied wherever he goes, Cheng Chou said. Jiang Hao nodded. In the afternoon, after selling some talismans at the market, he returned to his house. Early the next morning, Jiang Hao watered the heavenly fragrance Dao flower before heading to the mines. He wanted to check on Lin Ji. In a short while, Jiang Hao found a senior brother he had worked under before. He was Wei Lai. Back then, he had worked under him when he was in the early stage of the Golden Core realm. Wei Lai looked at Jiang Hao with a strange expression. He was supposed to have a fierce, bald, and menacing appearance, but at this moment, he appeared somewhat comical. Senior brother Wei, it's been a long time, Jiang Hao said respectfully as he greeted him. Junior brother Jiang, you had extraordinary talents. I'm sorry to have offended you back then, said Wei Lei politely. Over a decade ago, Jiang Hao was at the Foundation Establishment realm, and now, he had reached the middle stage of the Golden Core realm. He had surpassed Wei Lai. Once someone of this caliber was offended, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, just being called senior brother made him feel somewhat relieved. The tone of the other person was calm, unlike someone seeking revenge. Moreover, if there was any retaliation planned, he wouldn't have waited until now. I was grateful for your guidance back then, senior brother. Jiang Hao chuckled lightly. At that time, when he was working here, Wei Lei wasn't particularly friendly to him, but he hadn't intentionally targeted him either. No. Wei Lai shook his head. What brings you here this time? A junior is working here, so I came to see him, Jiang Hao said truthfully. Wei Lai seemed somewhat worried. A sudden visit like this. Was he here to stand up for that junior? Which junior are you talking about? Perhaps, I know him, he said politely. Lin Ji, Jiang Hao said. Lin Ji? Wei Lai asked. He did know Lin Ji. Quite a few people knew about him. However, no one knew that a Golden Core realm cultivator had come to see him. I do know junior brother Lin, but he seems, Wei Lai appeared a bit troubled. Senior brother, you needn't worry. Some friction between fellow disciples of the same sect is normal, Jiang Hao politely said. I'm not here for that. His meaning was clear. Some friction and bickering between disciples were normal. However, targeting someone intentionally was not okay. Wei Lai breathed a sigh of relief. After that, he led the way. Upon finding Lin Ji, Jiang Hao discreetly handed him a talisman. It wasn't a very valuable talisman, but it conveyed his sentiments. After all, this wasn't his territory, and it wasn't appropriate to use his cultivation realm to pressure others. Chapter 745. What should be set free has been set free. 1. Wei Lai left. Jiang Hao stood in place. In just over a decade, he had surpassed Wei Lai. The speed of his cultivation was simply inconceivable. If it weren't for junior brother Han, Jiang Hao wouldn't have dared to advance this way. There would have been many eyes on him. However, with Han Ming around, things were different. Han Ming bore the brunt of most of the attention, and the remaining would be absorbed by the Blood Wish path. This way, Jiang Hao could relax. Even if there were a few curious onlookers, there wouldn't be anyone daring enough to act. The danger was minimal. He then shifted his gaze to the entrance of the mine. Lin Ji stood in the prisoners' area. While he helped supervise, he was also responsible for mining. Jiang Hao approached the entrance. At that moment, he saw Lin Ji hard at work with his pickaxe. Fortunately, his gaze was still sharp, unlike the numb look the other miners wore. Spending too long mining here made people gradually numb. This was the fate of countless miners. The Heavenly Note sect's mining site was relatively better. It at least allowed people to cultivate in peace. In other places, to exercise better control, they didn't permit cultivation. Only a very few could cultivate independently. After he entered the mine, Jiang Hao followed along without anyone noticing his presence. It wasn't until the miners started working and Lin Ji was scolded a few times that he began mining in a corner. Those who didn't know might have mistaken him for an ordinary miner. After observing for a while, Jiang Hao noticed that Lin Ji's movements were fast and efficient, and he looked calm. He didn't get angry or embarrassed when he was scolded. However, his face looked dejected, as though something was on his mind. Jiang Hao finally took out a pickaxe, approached Lin Ji, and began mining beside him. Clang! As the pickaxe struck, Lin Ji noticed someone beside him. He turned to look and froze. Senior brother. Jiang Hao continued to mine without looking up. Do you know what kind of life I enjoy? What? Lin Ji also started mining, but unlike Jiang Hao, he couldn't focus. Mining is the life I once desired. Jiang Hao gently smiled. Lin Ji didn't believe it. Nobody would willingly come to mine. It was too monotonous, dirty, and chaotic here. How could an immortal be willing to come here? Jiang Hao paused, looked at Lin Ji beside him, and said seriously, have you ever thought that the life you're living now might be the dream of others? Lin Ji was stunned. He was completely frozen in place. He had thought he was suffering. He believed his life was difficult. He now realized that he was still alive and well. The spirit beast looked after him and a senior cared for him. He even had 2 friends who occasionally sought him. In a demonic sect, how many people were as fortunate as he was? After thinking for a long time, Lin Ji finally said, I understand now. Jiang Hao gazed at him for a while, then continued mining. Spirit +1, strength +1, spirit sword +1, watching the bubbles fall, he felt a sense of contentment. However, blue bubbles were not easy to come by. Perhaps one day, there wouldn't be any bubbles anymore. He would then have to seek rarer ores and approach some divine creatures. I wonder if there's any or near the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. Jiang Hao suddenly thought. He could consider it next time. He could only intervene as long as the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl remained sealed. Once it was unsealed, he could only flee. However, this matter wasn't urgent. He had to wait for Hong Yuye. Do you want to go back? Jiang Hao asked while mining. A little. Lin Ji nodded. Jiang Hao thought about it. Who would willingly stay at a mine at such a young age? Have you been neglecting your cultivation? Jiang Hao asked. No. Not even a little, said Lin Ji. Jiang Hao felt relieved. Some people couldn't handle the pressure and would give up on themselves. Lin Ji had a promising future. If he were to give up on himself now, his future would become even more challenging. Jiang Hao didn't speak further but continued mining until afternoon. Lin Ji was somewhat surprised. Why wasn't the senior resting with the other miners? If his senior didn't rest, he couldn't afford to rest either. Jiang Hao mined until break time and spoke little throughout the day. Only when it was over did he follow Lin Ji back to his dwelling. Because of the spirit beast's formidable reputation, Lin Ji had been given a small room to himself. Other lifeblood refinement realm cultivators shared rooms with 3 or 4 people. Have you been practicing the Star Moon lifeblood refinement technique all this time? Jiang Hao asked as he sat down. The simple lodging was far from the accommodations found at the outer sect. Many people believe this place was unfit for humans. If they were sent here, everyone would assume they had made a mistake or offended someone. It was unheard of for anyone to come here for training. Yes, I've been continuously practicing. I wouldn't dare to slack off, said Lin Ji. Do you have any doubts? Jiang Hao asked. The Star Moon lifeblood refinement technique belonged to the Bright Moon sect, and it contained certain complexities. Understanding it was not a given, especially since Lin Ji had limited exposure to various techniques and very little experience. There would be doubts. As expected, Linji raised some issues. He experienced slight discomfort when practicing the Star-Moon Lifeblood refinement technique in different ways. Jiang Hao spent half the night teaching Linji. He explained some parts and deliberately left others somewhat ambiguous to allow Linji to ponder on his own. The Star-Moon Lifeblood refinement technique required delving into the stars and myriad things. It didn't have a simple explanation. Over-explaining could cause one to lose their creativity. Once Linji had a general understanding, Jiang Hao asked something tentatively. Chapter 746. What should be set free has been set free, too. Do you want to go back? Jiang Hao was referring to his hometown. His home was there and also the resting place of Linji's mother. After reaching the Foundation establishment realm, Linji was no longer the same as before. He could return. He had the qualification to kneel in front of his mother's grave and declare that he had become an immortal. Unfortunately, it had come too late. Linji remained silent for a long time. Jiang Hao patiently waited. Some people could return home, while others didn't even have a place to return to. Linji hesitated for a while. Can someone at the first stage of the Lifeblood refinement realm really go out? Jiang Hao smiled. As long as you're willing. There are still many things to attend to at the mines, Linji said worriedly. Jiang Hao suddenly realized that Linji was entangled in many things. He wanted to go back, but his situation prevented him from doing so. He had tasks to accomplish, and duties restricted him. Returning home would affect many things. It wasn't that he didn't want to go back, but he was simply occupied. Jiang Hao felt sentimental. The current Linji was akin to his past self. Once too much attention was drawn, he would easily become the target of others. Everyone wanted a peaceful life. That's not a problem, Jiang Hao said. Once one's cultivation reached a certain realm, many things would become easier. But not everything waited for his cultivation to improve. Some things would eventually pass and were beyond his control. After bidding farewell to Linji, Jiang Hao returned to his courtyard. He hadn't visited the spirit herb garden today, but his gains surpassed those from the garden. He could frequently use Linji as an excuse to go to the mines, but doing so for a long time would attract attention. People would become suspicious. It was quite troublesome, especially with Hong Yuye. She was very perceptive. While other things being discovered might be manageable, the discovery of the bubbles in the mines must be avoided at all costs. Everything now rested on the kindness of others. But where was kindness in the cultivation world? Sitting in the courtyard, the only thing Jiang Hao could do was to adapt to the situation as much as possible and try to gain more bubbles. He needed to slowly improve. After a moment of silence, Jiang Hao started making talismans. Many things were difficult and living through it meant enduring numerous hardships. Yet, he still wanted to strive and hope. The more he did, the easier the future would be. Even in despair, he wanted to find a glimmer of hope. Blaming his fate or others wasn't his style. What he had to do now was earn spirit stones and obtain another golden bubble from the beast. The immortal peach tree's incarnation had to wait until next year, but there was no hurry. Time passed swiftly, and in just over 10 days, May arrived. The sect remained as quiet as ever, and this peace continued for several months. Linji descended the mountain and left. Jiang Hao initially thought of sending Cheng Chou with him, but he eventually gave up on the idea. Linji was no longer the teenager from years ago. He was now a young man in his 20s. He had his own thoughts and his own path to make. Not everything needed to be protected. However, on the day after Linji left, Chu Chuan came looking for him. He intended to descend the mountain to find Linji. Jiang Hao agreed to his request. They were the same age. It wouldn't hurt for them to explore the world together. At this point, everyone Jiang Hao intended to set free wasn't around him. It's really quiet now. In the spirit herb garden, Jiang Hao was filled with emotions. He needed to get used to such silence. At the Bright Moon sect, Shu Bai sat under a tree and gazed at the sky. The spiritual energy flowed gently around him and gradually entered his body. At that moment, A hint of the sword's intent emerged from his magic treasure and interfered with the spiritual energy. For a while, the spiritual energy was tainted by the sword's intent, then it poured into Shu Bai's body. When the amount of spiritual energy was sufficient, the sword's intent was repelled. It surged out of Shu Bai's body and entered the magic treasure. Only then did he open his eyes. His aura had become heavier, and he appeared somewhat taller. With that, he stood up and left. He arrived at another peak. "Greetings, senior brother," someone on the path said respectfully. Shu Bai nodded slightly and walked toward the peak. The once bright sky gradually gave way to stars as he entered the mountain, and the night was speckled with more stars. Eventually, the sky became a sea of stars. Shu Bai paused in front of a star platform. "I, Shu Bai, respectfully request an audience with Master." "Come on up," a deep said from above. Shu Bai smiled and stepped up. After a while, he stopped in front of an elder with white hair, and a compass floated in front of him. Inside the compass, there were myriad stars. There were faint fluctuations within. Shu Bai didn't know what these fluctuations represented. He didn't have much understanding of this. "Why did you suddenly come to find an old man like me?" The Ancient One slowly raised his head and asked the young man in front of him. "May I sit?" Shu Bai asked. "You're being quite polite now. When I invited you to be my disciple back then, you were quite impolite when you refused." The Ancient One chuckled. "Master, you must be joking." "It was you who refused," said Shu Bai awkwardly. Then, he sat down. "Speak. What's the matter?" The Ancient One glanced down at the star compass. Shu Bai smiled. "Master, do you know about the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl?" The Ancient One raised his eyebrows and glanced at the person in front of him. "Do you want to know about that, or do you want to say something else?" Shu Bai didn't beat around the bush and got to the point. "I've heard that the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl might be on the brink of breaking the seal." The Ancient One frowned. "What? Where is the pearl now?" "The southern region," Shu Bai said. "It seems your answer isn't entirely false. But are you really here to ask me to verify whether the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl is truly about to break its seal?" asked the Ancient One indifferently. "Let me tell you this, after the appearance of the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, I started to calculate the possibility of such calamities occurring. I only got an answer recently. The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl won't be an issue this soon. Perhaps there have been other recent changes?" Shu Bai asked. "The end of all things might offer some clues." "That's just child's play. Do you truly believe that you can find the location of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl by relying on the end of all things? Even if they know, they can't enter the place. The predecessors who sealed the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl aren't comparable to those from the end of all things," said the Ancient One. "Master, you are indeed stubborn," Shu Bai said helplessly. "How about at least taking a look?" The Ancient One snorted coldly. "What do you expect me to do then?" Shu Bai pointed to his head. "Try it here on the spot. And if there's no reaction?" asked the Ancient One. Shu Bai thought for a long time. Then, "Treat it as if I never came here to pester you," the Ancient One sneered. "You've got some nerve." Shu Bai's face remained unchanged. He looked up at the starry sky for a long time before withdrawing his gaze. "I'm not that bold or shameless. I'm just here to tell you that I won't lose, Master. You are quite confident. Let's see what the consequences of your confidence will be." The Ancient One coldly snorted and slapped the table with a hand. The surrounding stars began to emit a strong light. For a moment, the stars in the sky revolved, and the cycle of cause and effect converged. A burst of starlight erupted from the Ancient One, and his whole being merged with the stars of heaven and earth. After a while, he frowned, squeezed out from the stars, and his previous calmness was replaced with shock. Something big is about to happen. Shu Bai was surprised. Was the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl's movement so significant? No. It's not just the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl this time. It might involve the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl. Within half a year, we must find its location and attempt to stabilize the seal, said the Ancient One, and once again entered the stars. Shu Bai sighed. Half a year, he had a bit of time, after all. It was just that the situation was dire. The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl might be possible to block, but the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl couldn't. And the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl was near the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. Maybe I need to pay a visit to the Clear Sky School. Visiting the Clear Sky School wasn't a big deal for him. It was just the right time to go and see Shang-en. It was said that one could see his back on a certain mountain peak. One could even converse with him. Speaking with a sage was a good thing. Asking him about matters in the southern region might also lead to new discoveries. Chapter 747, Eagerly awaiting the Demoness arrival. Jiang Hao's days passed uneventfully. He watered the flower in the morning and tended to the spirit herbs in the afternoon. He then set up a stall at the marketplace and returned in the evening to craft talismans. At present, there wasn't much else for him to do. Only the matter of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl hung over his head like a blade. Everything else could be postponed, even the matters with the Heavenly Joy Pavilion, Feng Hua, and the end of all things. All could be discussed later. When he returned, Jiang Hao glanced at the belt hanging at his waist. It had completely fused with the other sets, and he could now assess its effectiveness. He had the battle armor, wrist guards, boots, a ring, and now the belt. It made up a set of 5 items for the 9 Heavens battle armor. Together, they possessed formidable power. However, most of them were for defense. He appraised them. Belt of the 9 Heavens battle armor. The abilities of the 5 battle armors have been increased to the return to Void Realm in all aspects. It can release a defensive circle to completely defend against surrounding attacks. Spells, poisons, and curses cannot break through. It's actually a defensive circle. Jiang Hao was somewhat surprised. Moreover, it was a defensive circle that could protect against various attacks. Until now, he had defended only against direct attacks. Poison and curses could only be resisted by his body or spiritual essence. Now, with the belt, it would be difficult for attacks at the return to Void Realm to penetrate. 5 pieces. I wonder how many pieces there are in total. Jiang Hao was curious. If he gathered them all, what kind of power would it wield? How would it manifest itself? Although he was somewhat looking forward to it, he knew it would be challenging to collect them all. He could only wait patiently. These past few days, besides his daily routine, there hadn't been much else. He had earned some spirit stones. But he still hadn't encountered senior brother Duan Guan and senior sister Lang Tian. The peace within the sect made him feel comfortable. If the sect didn't attack those outside, the people outside would find opportunities and grow. An unprecedented peace quietly descended on the sect. Jiang Hao knew that this calmness could easily be shattered by the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. Now, he only hoped for more strong individuals in the sect so that he would at least get a chance to escape. Hong Yuya hasn't visited. Jiang Hao looked up at the sky. He felt unusually eager for her arrival. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hao sold a heaven rejuvenating pill in the marketplace for 7,000 spirit stones. The price had dropped because of the arrival of Shang-en. His ascension had given many people an opportunity to advance in their cultivation realm. Various elixirs and talismans were priced down. Without hesitation, he went to the Snow Lotus Pavilion. "What do you need, senior brother?" asked the woman at the reception. She knew that Jiang Hao was a decent customer. "I need to buy some tea leaves." The woman smiled. "I can make some decisions on the things that are being sold. Perhaps I can offer you a discount too." "Really?" Jiang Hao felt delighted. "How much cheaper can you make the September spring?" The woman smiled. "I can lower the price a little. Maybe around 10, initially confident in her reply, the woman suddenly paused. She thought she had misheard. "What kind of tea are you looking for, senior brother?" "September spring," Jiang Hao said. Her face soured, but she quickly composed herself. Stepping back, she respectfully said, "Senior brother, please follow me." Jiang Hao didn't mind the change in her demeanor. He just wanted to know if there would be a discount. Hong Yuya had asked for it, so he couldn't be negligent as per their last agreement. Otherwise, it might cause problems. After a while, Jiang Hao left the Snow Lotus Pavilion. He had spent 19,500 spirit stones on the tea. He was even more far away from catching up on the amount of spirit stones to awaken the beast's bloodline. Only 38,000 spirit stones at hand made him feel helpless. How long would it take to earn 20,000 more? Letting out a heavy sigh, Jiang Hao headed back to his house. Some matters were rather urgent and needed more thought. He believed that Hong Yuye could deal with the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. Time slowly passed. It was early June. There still hadn't been any developments at the Lawless Tower. The people from the Mountain Sea Sword sect didn't leave either. They seemed to be waiting for the Corpse Realm flowers to bloom. It was said that the Divine Corpse sect had sent an invitation, and they would arrive in a few months. Mu Longyu and Mi Lingyu left too. They seemingly ignored his advice. Jiang Hao didn't care about this. During this time, he read the Ancient and Modern book. It was an autobiography. It described a young man who emerged from the mountains. He was naive and thought only good things about the world. In the end, he was nearly killed by a wealthy family. After that, he became more familiar with the world and embarked on the path of growth. Later, he was scouted by a teacher and joined the Astronomical Academy. He rose swiftly afterward and was unstoppable in his momentum. After growing up, he traveled from the west to the east and then to the north. Over the years, he learned many things at the Bright Moon sect, the Clear Sky School, and the Mountain Sea Sword sect. He defeated all the strong individuals of the same generation and dominated that era. Finally, he headed to the south. He froze in the face of the truth and vanished without a trace. After reading it, Jiang Hao felt that it was the autobiography of an ancient figure. Moreover, the part where he froze in the face of the truth seemed obviously added later on. He flipped to the back and discovered a sentence. "Farewell, I am and yet am not myself." Looking at the book, Jiang Hao thought of the imprint on his hand. "It feels like I've fallen into an ancient and modern trap. I'll have to be more careful in the future." After that, there was nothing much to do. Jiang Hao felt a bit anxious, but he remained calm. News about the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was hard to come by, and finding its entrance was even more challenging. Being weak was indeed troublesome. If the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl were to erupt, the only gamble would be the Corpse Realm. Once inside, he could avoid this calamity. The question was whether he could safely enter it. Boom. In Devil's Den, Zheng Shijiu and the others had eliminated another batch of demons. But they were all somewhat exhausted. "Why are there so many?" Xin Yuyue was astonished. They had been to Devil's Den several times, and apart from the previous counterattacks by the demons, such a situation hadn't occurred before. There were simply too many. Groups of demons were coming out from deeper inside. Compared to the previous counterattacks, it was definitely less severe in strength, but it was significantly more in numbers. Xiao Li never attacked. It was always the seniors who killed the enemies. Occasionally, one or two would come running over to her in their injured state. She killed them with a single strike. "This doesn't seem ordinary. We should inform the sect," Zheng Shijiu said. Yu Yu's brow furrowed. This was indeed quite tricky. The demons here were not only numerous but also powerful. They were currently in the forest, but the forest had no visible boundary, so they didn't dare venture too deep. "This is not good," Duan Yu suddenly said and stood up. "The vigilant array I set up has been triggered. Numerous demons are approaching. This is troublesome." Zheng Shijiu frowned. "Retreat first and then figure things out." No one objected because the demons were too challenging to deal with. After a while, Duan Yu sighed. "The path we took has changed. Now, we can't find our way back." Roar. Distant roars echoed. It indicated that numerous demons were about to surround them. "Set up an array and see if we can manage them for a while," Zheng Shijiu said as he took a deep breath. Except for Xiao Li, the others didn't hesitate. Chapter 748, The One with Fortune and Luck. Half a month later, in early June, under a secluded and dimly lit tree, several individuals began arranging formations. Every person was on high alert. Only after finishing the arrangements did they relax. We'll hide here first, take turns watching our surroundings, and alert each other immediately if there's an issue. Zheng Shijiu sat down exhausted. Half a month ago, they were forced to engage in a defensive battle and hadn't been able to leave at all. The demons didn't allow much time for preparation, but luckily, their strength was passable. They could manage, but now, they fought while retreating. They used to chase the demons, but in just a short span of days, everything reversed. They became the prey, while the demons became the hunters. When will this end? Xin Yuyue leaned against a tree with numerous injuries. We can't contact the outside. Duan Yu's complexion grew even paler. Yuyu kept her head down. She was exhausted, yet she couldn't rest because the demons would catch up at any moment. Xiao Li sat nearby and helped to cook. Zheng Shijiu had set up formations in advance, so the flames wouldn't affect the surroundings. Soon, everything was cooked, and Xiao Li distributed portions to each person. Then, she started eating her own. Not long after, she finished hers. She still wanted more. She sneakily glanced at the meat in front of Zheng Shijiu. Seeing her senior meditating with closed eyes, she asked in a low voice, "Senior brother, are you going to eat? If not, can I have it?" He didn't reply, so she sneakily reached out. However, just as she was about to touch the meat, something tapped at the back of her hand. Startled, she retracted her hand. She turned to see the beast. She felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She saw her old, adopted mother appear behind the beast as if saying, "Do not steal other people's things." Behind her old mother, there was a young figure. The face was invisible but was riddled with exceptional vitality. She opened her mouth, and a voice, both unfamiliar and familiar, mixed with her mother's, followed, "Don't use your hands, use chopstick." Soon, the image disappeared, and she only saw the beast in front of her. Xiao Li withdrew her hand and rubbed her back. Her stomach growled. "Friends on the road can offer you something to eat, but stealing? The owner won't show me respect after that." The beast stood on Xiao Li's shoulder. "Say the name of Lord Beast, and you can eat whatever you want." At that moment, Zheng Shijiu woke up and glanced at the meat in front of him. He then handed it to Xiao Li. "Here, junior sister Xiao Li. You can eat it. Is that all right?" Xiao Li asked. Zheng Shijiu nodded. Xiao Li smiled. Indeed, the beast's influence was useful. Meanwhile, in the distance, numerous demons appeared around the lush forest's edge. Changes unfolded silently. At the White Moon Lake, senior sister Yinshaw walked through the main gate. "Ju Chan, has Elder not come out yet?" she asked. Ju Chan was taken aback. "Elder Baiji has been in seclusion all this time. Can you inform her? Just say I have something important to report." Yinshaw looked at Ju Chan earnestly. Zhao Qingxue felt puzzled. It seemed like the seniors in the sect all liked to send senior sister Ju Chan to find Elder Baiji. But Elder Baiji doesn't want to be disturbed at this time, Ju Chan said hesitantly. "This is a major matter." "Please go ahead," Yinshaw said. After Ju Chan left, Zhao Qingxue curiously asked, "Senior sister, why do you all like to send senior sister Ju Chan to find Elder Baiji?" Yinshaw smiled. "Because Ju Chan is favored by her." Zhao Qingxue was even more confused. "When you become stronger, maybe then you'll understand. In our sect, anyone might betray the elder, except Ju Chan. To Elder Baiji, Ju Chan is the most trustworthy of all the people," Yinshaw said. Zhao Qingxue lowered her head. She still didn't understand. Soon, Ju Chan came out and told Yinshaw to enter. In the courtyard, Baiji stood in the yard. Her aura was elusive. It gave off an unfathomable feeling. However, her face seemed somewhat downcast. "Elder," Yinshaw said respectfully. "What is it?" Baiji asked. Her voice carried a chill. Yinshaw knew that if the information wasn't something important, she would be held accountable. "Devil's Den is facing problems," Yinshaw said seriously. "It's a strange issue. The terrain has changed, and there's been no news from the core. The number of demos has increased, and the forest is filled with them. Can the core still be reached?" Baiji asked. "No." Yinshaw shook her head. Devil's Den was a peculiar place, and they knew very little about it. All they knew was that it needed to be manned, and the demons were the most active race within. It required clearing every year. Sometimes they counterattacked, and it always brought a lot of trouble. But it hadn't been long since the last counterattack, so theoretically, this type of incident shouldn't happen. No one has been sent to suppress it? Baiji asked. No. They can't. The more people go, the stronger the response, and the larger the changes. The heads of various branches dare not approach, Yinshaw earnestly said. Such changes made people wary. Since there was no answer, they had to consult Baiji. Baiji thought for a while. What is the strength of the demons now? The highest is at the middle stage of the gold core realm, and the weakest at the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm, Yinshaw said. Choose 5 individuals from the sect. 1 from each stage, from the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm to the middle stage of the gold core realm, among the strongest at the same level. Send them in first to clear the demos. Well, consider the rest later. Yes. Yinshaw didn't hesitate. Baiji watched her depart and frowned. This change was quite significant. Something within Devil's Den was definitely causing this. This was no longer something she could decide upon on her own. Even though she had ascended, she still dared not take Devil's Den lightly. Where there was bad, there was also good, and they had gained quite a lot because of this. Otherwise, they would have certainly been handed over to the immortal sects. Soon after, she disappeared from the spot and went to the 100 Flowers Lake. A red and white figure was seen in the pavilion. In the past, she had only ever seen the figure from afar. Seeing the sect master still felt mysterious and impossible. Baiji understood that this was due to her ascension. It allowed her to sense things more. She also realized how terrifying the sect master was. Fortunately, she had never had any problematic thoughts. Your subject, seek an audience, master, said Baiji. The 100 flowers in the lake swayed gently. Baiji understood that this meant she could enter. Soon, she arrived in front of the pavilion and quietly waited. Hong Yuye sat in the pavilion and sipped her tea. After a moment, she finally said, "Speak." An anomaly has occurred in Devil's Den, Baiji said. She then mentioned her own approach to a solution. Hong Yuye turned to look at Baiji. Your luck this time is quite favorable. Baiji was somewhat surprised. Why did the conversation turn to this? It's due to your guidance, master. Hong Yuye shook her head slightly. Just sending people with strong abilities won't suffice for the matter in Devil's Den. We need individuals who possess sufficient luck and fortune to test their luck. Test their luck? Baiji was somewhat puzzled. If not handled properly, the consequences could be unimaginable. After hesitating for a while, Baiji finally asked, "But where can we find individuals with sufficient luck and fortune?" Hong Yuye glanced meaningfully at her. "You may go now." Baiji frowned as she left. What did the sect master mean by that? Just now, sect master mentioned that my luck is favorable. Could it be that I possess luck and fortune? It's highly unlikely. If it were just me, the sect master wouldn't need to mention it. After thinking for a moment, Baiji recalled the origin of her opportunity, which came from Shong'an. Why had Shong'an appeared here? For Jiang Hao, the person who possessed luck and fortune might actually be Jiang Hao. Is the sect master trying to tell me that Jiang Hao already possesses enough luck and fortune and that he might be incomparable? Chapter 749 ranked first among his peers early the next morning, Jiang Hao tended to the spirit herbs as usual. He watered and tended to them. There hadn't been any news of changes in the sect recently. So, each day passed calmly, and there was no one coming to bother the spirit herb garden anymore. It wasn't because his golden core could suppress everything, but rather because people didn't have the time to trouble him. On this day, Miao Tinglian found him. Why are you still here taking care of the spirit herbs? Jiang Hao was puzzled. What else should he be doing if not tending to the spirit herbs? Master asked you to come over, Miao Tinglian said. Jiang Hao frowned. Master called me. I haven't received any messages yet. So, why do you think I am here? Miao Tinglian said with a smile. Jiang Hao felt his senior sister was quite good at teasing people. At that moment, Miao Tinglian looked around and whispered, "Want to take a look?" "Look at what?" Jiang Hao asked. "At the junior sisters in the middle and lower stages of Golden Core Realm. Although we are from the demonic sect, these people care a lot about their status. I guarantee there won't be any problems," Miao Tinglian said seriously. Jiang Hao was speechless. Was senior sister Miao so bored that she bothered with things like these? "What about senior brother Mu Qi?" Jiang Hao asked. "There are so many outstanding junior sisters to see. Why are you concerned about my husband?" Miao Tinglian asked. Jiang Hao was at a loss. Finally, he made an excuse to see his master and left. "Junior brother Jiang, are you really not considering it?" Jiang Hao turned a deaf ear. Upon reaching his master's courtyard, Jiang Hao noticed there were already 4 other people there. They were at the middle stage, late stage, and peak of the Foundation Establishment realm, and the 4th person was at the early stage of the Golden Core realm. He hadn't seen any of them before. But each person emitted a unique aura. It gave off a chilling and heavy feeling. "Master." Jiang Hao looked towards the highest seat and bowed in greeting. "I need you to take them on a trip to Devil's Den," said Ku Wu Chang with a nod. Jiang Hao frowned. Devil's Den? Again. Moreover, this time the people were evidently very strong. "Why?" he asked. Not long ago, Xiao Li and the others had just entered, and now there was a need for another group. 3 batches had gone in within a few months. It seemed like something was wrong inside. There was a slight accident in Devil's Den. It's now full of demons, but their cultivation hasn't exceeded the middle stage of the Golden Core realm. And it will increase according to the strength of the people entering, so only you guys can go in, Ku Wu Chang said. "Us?" Jiang Hao was puzzled. After thinking for a moment, he realized that among the same realm, these people were probably the strongest. And he had been ranked first among his peers several times, so it was all because of his high status. But how could Devil's Den have problems for no reason? For a moment, Jiang Hao thought of the blood pool and the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl beside it. If it was indeed because of that, it would be useless for him to go. It would even be dangerous. Although he was concerned, he still promptly accepted the task. It was unexpected for him to be the team leader this time. They hurried to Devil's Den. The task this time had 2 parts, clearing the demons and finding out the problem, then contacting the outside as soon as possible. On the way, Jiang Hao got to know these people. Qian Dongjie, in the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, was a young man in his 20s. He was a disciple of the Flowing Waterfall branch. His body was filled with explosive power. Tan Baiyu was in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment. She wore a pink dress and her eyes exuded indifference. She was a disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall and was skilled in the use of spells. Wen Feng, at the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm, was a somewhat tall man from the Ice Moon Valley. He emitted a chilly aura. Avatar next. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,